Okay, I think it's working. Okay, last time it gave me a hard time.
Oh yeah, it says live.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Ask Sarah Anything. Special presentation for equine that Sarah's been putting together for us for the Adored Beast Apothecary Equine line. Tonight, Sarah is going to talk about Heaves in horses. We're going to talk about allergies, asthma, and also, Sarah, what did you mention? Something about steroids and how to manage your horse if they need support from steroids and they're dealing with Heaves. Sarah and I were talking behind the scenes before we got started, just while everyone joins us. And we might have something super special planned for an event in October, but it's hush hush. We're not saying anything just yet. You'll find out. Okay, so thanks for joining us today. Sarah, can you get started by telling us what Heaves is, what it looks like in our horses, and things to watch out for?
Yeah, so hi everyone, nice to see you. Thanks for coming. This one's a little bit close to home for me because I also have asthma, which is also known as Heaves, and also can sometimes be called COPD. And it's a really frustrating disease that a lot of people are dealing with. It's quite it's really heartbreaking to watch, especially if it's really severe. And anyone who has a horse with Heaves probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I wanted to do a segment on it because it's something that I get asked about a lot. And the conventional ways of handling it are effective in some senses of the word, but they all have, unfortunately, like some pretty serious side effects. So I wanted to kind of address that and talk about how we can reduce a horse's allergic response to allergens, strengthen their immune system, and hopefully to be able to reduce their amount of steroids that they have to go on if they have to have them. And then also, if they do have to have them, then what kinds of support can we give them to minimize the side effects of those drugs? So there's so much to talk about with it, especially because it's a seasonal disease as well, and it's also has an allergic component to it. So and a lot of horses that have allergies, they often have other issues going on. I was just recently talking to someone at a horse show whose horse broke out in hives at the horse show, and I kind of said, here's my card if you want to chat about, some things that might be able to help him for that. And she said, yeah, he's on a lot of ulcer medication and he has ulcers and et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, oh my goodness, like it's so, and so there's often other cofactors, like other disease processes that in conventional sense, they don't look like they're related, but in more holistic terms, all Julie and I ever talk about on here is gut health. So, and that is a centralized place where the immune system can either become really overreactive or under responsive. So allergy flare-ups can be worse if we're not kind of looking at like the flare-up itself is happening on that interstitial lining of the lungs or the gut, if it's IBS, or if it's bladder, immune-mediated bladder like cystitis. Those are all, that's the lining that's getting inflamed. and causing obstruction, pain, inflammation, discomfort, etc. So I wanted to kind of look at that on a bigger picture. So we did, I can't remember how long ago it was, but we have a YouTube link that maybe Steph can throw in the chat.
Yep.
That is about leaky gut and the mechanics of what leaky gut is, in terms of, and then how to actually bring a leaky gut back into a healthy, the linings become healthier, the mucosal layer become healthier, and then the microbiome as well, because those three things are related. And you can't really, if you're not looking at it in that light, you can't really fix the underlying issue. And if all you have on board is drugs, dexamethasone is usually one of the most common ones. Sometimes prednisone is also used, but Dex is well documented that it can cause ulcers. So even though it's reducing those respiratory symptoms, over time, you're actually doing damage to the gut, which will then put more pressure on the immune system, which will then make everything symptom-wise and frequency-wise, it can become more intense over time. So what we want to do is try and get them out of that negative feedback loop and into a positive feedback loop where you can start to reduce medications, hopefully, or at least support for that, and not just be, looking at the symptoms in front of you, but also thinking about what's happening inside this horse that is causing this flare up in the first place. So allergies are tough because a true allergy is the immune system has become confused and it has reacted to what's called a passive antigen. And that could be pollen, it could be grass particles, it could be anything environmental, it could be food related. So the immune system and the body creates an antibody to a passive protein that's floating around in the bloodstream. So when it's working properly, antibodies get saved for viruses, bacteria, and they strengthen our immune system and allow us to not have such strong immune responses, because it can get ahead. If we get that virus again, we've got antibodies to it, we can get on top of it very quickly because your T cells remember that from last time or anything similar to that. So that's what immunity is in a healthy sense. And then when things go wrong with allergies, allergies come from a miseducation of the immune system. So the antibodies can get saved for proteins that are not actually dangerous, like grass or like pollen. So when that happens, you're up against an actual allergy. So every time you come into contact with that respiratory, you breathe that in, you're going to have potentially a flare-up. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it is how well are those interstitial linings functioning before that flare-up occurs. So if you have your interstitial cells, so your airways in your lungs, and your lungs are full of little sacs called alveoli, and those sacs can get filled with fluid and become so inflamed that there's not as much room for oxygen to come into the lungs and get diffused into the bloodstream. So the pressure or the constriction plus the inflammation and the constriction causes the horse to look like, well, it causes the horse not to be able to breathe. So what it looks like is, flared nostrils, heavy breathing, low stamina. Sometimes it's not completely apparent until they start getting going, coughing, mucus from the eyes and nose, sometimes from the mouth as well. And oftentimes you'll see them just like kind of panting and standing there, and their sides will be going. And it's like they just ran a marathon, but they're just standing there. So, when it gets to that point, there's a lot that can be done, in that moment. Yes, you're going to probably have to give some medication for that, because breathing in oxygen is very important for our survival. So, but the goal, long-term goal should be to, not use as much of that over time, and to have a plan for how to get out of just using drugs for the symptoms that you see. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And if anyone has questions, we'll take some questions at the end as well. So yeah, for leaky gut, I'm just going to throw up a slide here because I want to make this correlation from leaky gut to other interstitial linings of the body. So the interstitial linings are everywhere in the body. They are in your respiratory tract, they're in your kidney tubules, your liver tubules, your gut lining, your bowel, your bladder, your brain, your ear canals. They're down way in the bottom. Everywhere in your body you have these interstitial linings that are able to make the distinction between what should come in and what should stay out. And when they're working really well, they're able to easily do that. When they become damaged or inflamed or unhealthy, that's when something called leaky gut occurs, which is also, it could be leaky anywhere. And then you get, here, I'll just share this screen with you. Share.
Is it letting you share, Sarah?
Yes.
Oh yeah, you got it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so so on the left we have a normal system. You can see the cells at the top with the little arms on them. Those are your epithelial lining. That's the interstitial lining. Those are the actual cells that form that lining. And then on top of that, you'll see there's like a little blue blob, and that's the mucus. And the mucus is created by a healthy set of cells, special cells that create mucus within that epithelial lining. There's lots of different types of cells in this lining, but that's just one of them. So that layer of mucus protects, it forms that layer of protection between, it's like a filter between the outside world and your cells. So, and then within the mucosal lining, that's where the microbiome lives. So once you start to get a lot of inflammation, you get erosion of the mucosal lining, you can get erosion of the actual lining, the cells themselves. And that's what ulcers are in horses. But you can also have this inflammatory, leaky kind of membrane happening in other areas of the body. So for example, like at one point in my life, I had interstitial cystitis, which is a inflammatory version of leaky gut, but it's in the bladder. And it was very, very severe. And it took everything in my knowledge power to like transition myself out of that. But it was only because Julie had taught me that, you know, these systems, these linings can be repaired. And that's one of the best parts about when we're talking about, you know, it looks bad, it causes lots of destruction, it looks terrible, it feels terrible. But the good news is that these linings are extremely regenerative. So if you have a problem going on, if you are really focused on getting this lining to get back to where it should be, it's not as long of a process as sometimes with other diseases, because these cells turn over so quickly. So our epithelial linings can be replaced between every 2 and 4 days. Our cells are turning over that quickly. So and that's why it's so dangerous when somebody has bowel cancer or some kind of interstitial cancer, because those cells are turning over so fast, the cancer can also grow very quickly. So think of these linings as extremely, when given the chance, they can be extremely regenerative and they can bounce back. So that's the good news about all of this. So then we have to take into consideration, usually, if they're having a severe enough response with their breathing, that there is a high possibility that other interstitial linings in the body are being affected. So I always try to explain that people should focus also on gut health. And that lady that I talked to at the horse show is a prime example that this horse had been dealing with chronic ulcers for, several years, and had recently started having more allergies, hive breakouts, all of this kind of stuff. And that can be a predisposing them further along down the line if they've got this allergic reaction going on. Maybe it's only on the skin now, but that could eventually turn into, like, a lot of horses that have hive issues also can have asthma as well. So it's a systemic inflammatory process, but then depending on the individual predisposition of that animal, that's where whatever system is affected, that's what's going to be affected. So one of my favorite speakers on this subject is a doctor named Dr. Zach Bush. And he always talks about, because he used to work in oncology, and he had this epiphany about how, what if all of these inflammatory diseases are actually one thing and we're just calling them all different things. So I thought that was pretty cool, because as like a homeopath or as a holistic practitioner, that's kind of how we're always thinking, is like, how can we help this animal systemically so that we can like actually help them like overcome this, this problem with this system, but we need to support all the systems to be able to do that, right? So, and then when we have this immune suppressant, gut damaging drug input, plus if they have, stress in their environment, if they have poor diet, lots of processed food, it's kind of the same thing as what happens to us in like the Western diet, and all of our stress and all of that, it can compound these problems and make them into a disease process. So that's kind of what we're going to do, is talk about how to how to actually support the respiratory system and then also the GI system, because the GI system is now being very much, between 80 to 85% or something is being deemed the immune system. So we never really knew how involved it was in immune processes until probably 20 years ago. But, it's just becoming more and more apparent over time that it's a pretty enormous part of how the immune system regulates itself. So if we have a lot of inflammatory, allergic type flare-ups, then we automatically have to pay attention to that as well. So we're going to talk about both things. The other thing, excuse me, I also have asthma. So I'm going to talk about things that also help me, which also have helped some horses that I've dealt with, as far as Heaves goes. So the other part I wanted to talk about is that a lot of times this disease is seasonal. A lot of people will report that their horses are worse in the heat and worse in the summer, and then they're better once the fall and the winter rolls around. So it's not always the case, but it's often the case because there's a lot more dust. It's a lot drier in the summer, so there's a lot more. They're inhaling a lot more debris in the summertime than they are in the wintertime. So, and that is true for me as well. So I have to be a lot more careful about handling hay and bedding and all of those things. And we have a couple of horses here that have asthma, and we have special outdoor paddocks for those horses because being in the barn, when the blower is going or when the stalls are being picked out and stuff, even that is enough dust to really cause an issue for them. So yeah, it's multifaceted. Obviously, in terms of environment, creating as little dust and as little fungus spores in the air is really important. So really clean stalls. Some horses are allergic to certain types of bedding. So it's well worth it to explore that and find a bedding that works for them. I also use a bedding that, if it can get dusty, but in the heat like this, I will actually hose the bedding down so that it's wet for the day while the horse isn't sleeping in it, and it keeps all the dust down, and then it's better for me when I'm cleaning it too, because then I'm not kicking up the dust when I'm cleaning it. So and then if your horse is eating off of bedding, it can be quite dusty and their faces are right there. So if you can either put up a hay net for them or feed them not on their bedding, that can also make a huge difference for them. So those are just a few things that, are pretty commonplace as far as getting them, minimizing the amount of dust that they're consuming through their airways. And then seasonally, I feel like, if you have seasons where you are, which most of you are probably listening from somewhere that has a seasonal rotation, it's really important to start working like this year, maybe not the year, because we're at the end of summer and you might need to just continue on with what you're doing, but you can, at this point in the season, you're probably going to get some reprieve once the rain and the cooler weather comes. And this is a really good time to start planning for the next season. So this is how far ahead you can plan to try and minimize next year's flare-up. So, and this gives you tons of time to focus on doing that and give your horse the best chance to be in a situation come next summer where they are less reactive because they've had all of this support while they're not in their most vulnerable state. And this can actually help to regenerate those tissues, regenerate those linings, help bring the reactivity down. And not to say that it will completely magically go away, but what you're always what your goal should be is to reduce the frequency and to reduce the severity of the flare-ups. So, that's always my goal, and and reduce the amount of medication that they have to take. So those are all, goals that can be adjusted depending on the horse. It's an individual process. So, I always say to all my clients and everyone I talk to, your horse better than anybody else. You're the one that, has the power to make these decisions. And, when your horse is feeling bad enough that you would have to, give them some kind of medication to relieve them a little bit. So, and then, I'm as liberal as I possibly can be with medications, but I, if they're needed, I use them too. And then I always provide support if I have to do that. So that's kind of how I think of it. So there's no like one way for every horse. And these are all just tools for you to possibly implement into your wellness plan for your horse. So I did a blog. I'll stop sharing this. Actually, maybe I'll just go down here and I'll show you. Yeah, we did a blog. It's on the website now, and then Steph's gonna be doing a post about it on social media, I think, this week. So Steph, you could even throw it in the chat if you want to give these guys a heads up on it. You can get them read. These are basically my top list of things that I do if I have a client, or I've had a couple of friends who've asked me about helping with their horses as well. So first thing is ditching the processed feed. I talk about this all the time. Reducing the amount of starch and sugar in the diet, because horses are extremely sensitive to starch and sugar, especially processed starch. They need high fiber. They need protein. Sometimes they're not getting enough amino acids. So that can be another thing that you might have to focus on if that's warranted. But processed feed is also often very heavily laced with a ingredient that won't be on the bag, which is Roundup or glyphosate. And most of the GMO'd crops that are grown for livestock use, like corn, wheat, alfalfa, sugar beets, they're all sprayed with glyphosate. They're all genetically modified to be able to withstand very high amounts of this chemical. And it is a known it's a patented antibiotic, and it's a known endocrine dysregulator. It's known to affect the microbiome and the mucosal lining and the epithelial linings of the body. So it's really important that if you have a horse with any sort of metabolic issue or inflammatory issue, that you are eliminating this from their diet completely, because it will not help the horse recover. It's just a daily input of something that is working against them. So it's really important to look at that. And Steph, there's another article you could throw on there. Can't remember what it's called, but I think it's on the blog, and it has I can't remember what the title of it is, but
it's about, I'll find it.
It's on diet, equine diet. So I go into very detail about all of the the do's and don'ts of feeding horses. And then a lot of people are using oils in their horse's diet, which is a good thought. Like omega-3 fatty acids are very beneficial when they are coming from a quality source. But unfortunately, in the oil form, they're not very often. Oftentimes they're rancid. So if they're being stored in plastic and they're not in the refrigerator and you get it from the feed store in a big jug, oftentimes it's not in a state that would be beneficial to your horse. So, and that goes for fish oil as well. Fish oil also is extracted with solvents, which are not listed as ingredients. It's also not species specific, so I don't like using fish oil with horses. And so I use only like freshly busted flax and soaked chia seeds. And if you have a really, you really want to reduce inflammation very quickly, you could use like a vegetarian, like an algae based DHA and EPA omega-3 fat, but it can get a little bit expensive doing that. So I usually just stick to the plant-based omega-3s, and they can do a lot of good for your horse. Just good old-fashioned seeds are a big one. And then I always recommend to feed plant-based foods that are supportive and regenerative for the gut lining. They feed the gut lining and help it to get back to its healthiest state. So there's tons of research on slippery elm bark, marshmallow root. Those are two huge ones for helping with reducing ulcers, and regenerating the mucosal lining, supporting that whole system in the gut. But then if you're repairing it in the gut, then you're helping to reduce systemic inflammatory reactions. So you can use these gut protective herbs to actually help with your horse's asthma. I also like to use lots of high fiber stuff instead of grain products or anything that's processed, because the minute it starts to get processed, it's a much more starchy state, even if it's comes from a fiber source. If it's been extruded and pelleted and et cetera, sometimes it's not very fibrous anymore. So it can actually be high in starch and therefore sugar. So I use non-GMO organic beet pulp. You have to use organic, make sure it's molasses free. And this can increase, like, the more different types of fiber you can get into your horse, this is the prebiotics of their diet, you can help to support the GI system, the interstitial lining, and then all the other interstitial linings in the body. Dandelion leaf and root are also really, really great as in terms of nutrition, and also as an anti-inflammatory agent for every body system. Ashwagandha and astragalus are two other herbs that are known as adaptogens, as well as medicinal mushrooms are also adaptogenic, which means that they help to modulate the immune system. So if it's overstimulated and overactive and lots of inflammation, it can help to bring it down. And if it's under functioning, and when you have a lot of colds, or you're just run down and you're tired and you keep getting sick all the time, then it can help to bring it up. But it doesn't do it by suppressing the immune system like a drug would do. So it allows the system to help to modulate itself depending on what's going on, rather than just dumbing it down, and calling it a day, which is in the long term quite destructive, as we well know. So as far as medicinal mushrooms go, the most highly indicated mushroom for respiratory disease is cordyceps mushrooms. So we don't have those, but there is a company that I believe you can get in Canada called Immubiome, which makes a great respiratory product for horses that contains cordyceps, and I think it has turkey tail in it as well. But that's the one that I am recommending at this moment, because we don't have them, but once we have them, I'll recommend ours. You can also use turkey tail as an adaptogenic overall immune system support. It is amazing for modulating the immune system as well, reducing systemic inflammation. Chaga is another one that's great, and also reishi mushrooms are also indicated for relaxing the system. And because there's a big, I know for me, and probably for animals too, there's a bit of a panic response that happens when you can't breathe. So a lot of people use cordyceps and reishi to help reduce stress, because the more stress you have, the more inflammation you can have, and it can actually, become a worse asthma attack because of the stress that's happening mentally for you or your animal. So I always recommend lots of medicinal mushrooms, but cordyceps in particular have a lot of science showing that they work specifically for asthma. So they're a great option. Probiotics, lots of diversity. If your horse is able to get them out on grass and dirt as much as humanly possible, because they diversify their microbiome by doing that. So, and then probiotics are wonderful as well, but they should be having access to natural environments to help, inoculate their system on a daily basis if it's possible. I know it's not always possible, but even 15 to 30 minutes of hand grazing can really make a huge difference. Just make sure it's not sprayed with anything where you're doing that. And then nutraceuticals, the top two that I use for myself and also for a lot of horses is quercetin with bromelain, which is known as the natural version of Benadryl. So horses can also benefit from this. I have used this on a couple horses and made it really huge difference for them. And what it does is it reduces histamine response. N-acetylglucosamine is another one that also helps to reduce the inflammatory reaction of the interstitial linings. So that is another huge plus for any type of interstitial, like IBS, asthma, bladder diseases, stuff like that. And then there is one homeopathic remedy. I generally recommend working with a homeopath if your horse is really chronic and is having a lot of symptoms, or if they have more than one disease process happening at a time. It's definitely important to work with a homeopath that can help you to find the remedies that will specifically work for your horse. But there's one remedy that I do recommend for allergies, which is histaminum, which is it's made from histamine and then potentized into a homeopathic remedy. And this can be given daily for horses that are having asthmatic or allergic symptoms. So I use it for hives as well, and for asthmatic symptoms. So you can usually if it's really severe, I'll give it up to 5 times a day for several days. And if they have to have drug input, I still give it because it's safe to give with medication. And then I continue to give it for, as long as I'm seeing symptoms, up to 2 weeks. And you can intermittently use it as needed. If you're seeing, hives is another one, that you can use that remedy, as needed for, 2 to 5 times a day for up to 2 weeks. Obviously, if your horse is really having trouble breathing, I would still recommend using your veterinarian, like whatever your veterinarian has prescribed. But it can help to reduce the amount that you have to use. So Dex is often used for hives and for asthma. And I don't think anyone really likes giving dexamethasone, as far as I know. We all would like to not give that if we could. But sometimes it's just a, quality of life, and it's really important. Oh, my kitty's coughing. Everyone's coughing today. Yeah, so that was the other thing I was just going to quickly mention, was that for the medication itself, it can cause a lot of pathologies on its own. Dex has also been scientifically shown to sometimes put horses into a laminitic state, which is also very not something that anyone wants. So it's really important to have these tools so that you can try and reduce the risks of those things happening to your horse. It's, I have seen it happen in real life, and it's really just not fun, because also once they have had a laminitic episode, they're much more likely to founder again. So you don't want to push them over the edge if you absolutely don't have to. So those are just some tips for what to do for Heaves. And then I also wanted to mention our liver tonic, which is a seasonal support, which I will recommend that if your horse is on medication or has seasonal allergies, that they should be on it during either and or both of those times. So that one has the ability to help the liver and the kidneys to process as efficiently as possible for if they have to have drugs. And then it also helps to, I have seen horses take the liver tonic that have hives, that have had chronic hives for years. And also I've seen it in dogs, like they start them on the liver tonic and they have super bad skin allergies, and it reduces the severity of their allergic response like significantly. So that one it's such a cost-effective herbal solution that it's so beneficial. So I use it for normal horses. I use it twice a year for the seasonal shifts in their circadian rhythm, so fall and spring. But if you have a horse that's struggling in the summer and has to be on medication and is having allergic issues, you can keep them on it from, winter, big end of winter to the end of fall, and just take them off in the winter if you want to, or you can keep them on all the time if you want to. So
Sarah,
we have some questions.
Yeah, there's a few questions. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Super helpful. Michelle's asking if you could recommend a quality grain.
Yeah, I don't really, there's not too many grains that I actually recommend. I usually just recommend really good forage. And then depending on what your horse is doing, the energy sources that I use, like oftentimes I find that horses aren't getting enough protein, which sounds weird, but sometimes it's a matter of just slightly increasing the protein. It depends on what you're looking to do. But, obviously we're always looking at our horse's condition. And when we don't like what we see, then we start to throw things that are full of energy at our horses. So we usually will use either some sort of fat or some sort of protein or some sort of grain. But I find that the most beneficial thing to do is to steer clear of processed extruded grain. Like, grain is not really something that horses actually eat. That's kind of like a thing that humans decided they should eat. If they eat it in the wild, it is in such a different state. It's so fibrous, and it's such a small part of their diet when they eat it in nature. So they should be getting high quality forage. And what I do for because I have performance horses, so my horses need a lot of extra food, and they can't maintain themselves just on hay. So they get a lot of hay. They always have hay, but they also have, I use the non-GMO beet pulp, which is a super high fiber, and it also has some protein in it as well. And then I use a small amount of a product called Cool Stance, which is a coconut-based fiber that is high in fat. So it's a non-starchy version of rice bran, basically. So rice bran is pretty starchy, and it's really, really high in fat, and it can pack on weight really fast if you have a horse that's like a hard keeper. But those are the only things that I use, and the coconut fiber is really low on the glycemic index, so it's not increasing the starch, but it is increasing the fat that your horse has access to. So I don't use very much of that because horses don't need a lot of fat. But if you have an issue with maintaining body condition, I often look at increasing the protein a little bit first, and then you can kind of see what they need by where they have what they look like. So if they're really having a hard time with their top line, I actually recommend increasing their amino acid intake rather than their fat intake or their starch intake or anything like that. So if she'd like to say exactly what her nutrition goals are for her horse, then I can be a little bit more specific.
There's one more from Michelle here, asking about the quantity of flax or chia that you feed Kingsley.
Yeah, so I use, what do I use? I use half a cup of chia a day. So that's dry. I measure it dry, and then I soak it before I feed it, just so it's a little gel. It turns into like a jelly. And that's actually very high in protein as well. And then flax, I usually do a little bit more, up to like a cup a day for the busted flax, because when you bust it, it gets kind of fluffy. So it's not as dense as the chia. But yeah, you can push it up, and you get a lot of protein, like a lot of amino acids out of that as well. So I find that even that in itself can help to start build the top line on your horse if you're not doing that already.
Thank you. There's a comment here that I want to read from Lauren. She said she's been battling her horse's heaves for years. You're speaking right to me, Lauren. I hope this.
There's lots to try, and yeah, if you need more help, we're always here. We can maybe if you want to get started and then you get stuck, just let us know and we can help you out.
Yeah, I think Lauren's in the Facebook group. I'm pretty sure we've chatted there before. There's a question here from Gail. Her question's not about Heaves, but melanoma. Will turkey tail and rebalancer be useful in reducing or eliminating a melanoma? She's also on the equine gut soothe and the liver cleanse. Not sure how long to use it for.
Okay. Well, some of the research that I've been doing on mushrooms is like, it's mind-blowingly crazy. So turkey tail is probably the most highly indicated for cancer. So any kind of cancer, it has the ability to re-educate the cells to remember to die, because with cancer, the cells become so damaged that they forget to die, and then they keep reproducing, and then they create this tumor, right? So what turkey tail can do, or what it's been shown that it can do, is to actually help the immune system and the cells to remember that they should do that. So that's a pretty massive thing. It's also been used in conjunction, it's approved as a cancer treatment in Japan and China and Russia, and also as a factor for helping chemotherapy to work better. So even if you have to go somewhat of a conventional route, it's been shown scientifically that it can be of service in those situations as well. But yeah, I would say like horses with cancer should be on it pretty much always. You know, if you're not seeing results, there's the recommended dose on the bottle, but if you have a educated practitioner that you can work with, you can push it up. Generally, if you do push it up, I mean, there's no actual known unsafe level of giving it. So you could push it up as much until you start to see something happen. So that could be, and then also for cancer, I recommend CBD as well, like both things.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, one more. Have you heard of Purica mushroom supplements?
Yeah.
Gail's asking.
I use their reishi.
Okay, so you do like that brand.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, they're great.
Michelle, what's a good quality hay? We're at a big barn and the rounded bales are moldy. We started buying bagged hay. Is there a brand that is acceptable? I have the blog, the horse hay blog.
Brand of hay?
Mm-hmm.
Is this for a horse that actually has heaves?
Michelle, I'm going to give you the mic here. We've got about 5 minutes left. Let me know if this will let you chat with us live.
Can I?
Hi.
Good to hear me. Hi, great. Hi. Yes, we have a 7-year-old gelding that we got in December, and springtime came, and so did Heaves quite severely, unfortunately. So we're trying to do everything we can to keep them comfortable. We did have to do the steroid route, but the main contributor was very dusty barn, the bales of hay, and that just was an onslaught to his whole system. So we started and it needed that they help reduce that dust, obviously. But I'm concerned about the bag the idea of botulism vaccine, because we were so, and now I don't know if even
Oh, did she fall off the face of the planet?
Yeah, shoot. It looks like she dropped off the call. Okay, that's okay. This will be here for the recording.
So I can just say what I would recommend, and then we can send it to her maybe, or hopefully she'll pop back on. So for horses that are really bad at, have symptoms, dust is like a major factor for causing them to have more symptomology. It's just everything that they inhale can be an irritant and just make everything more and more and more and more inflamed. So I recommend for horses that have active asthma situation that they should be on soaked food. So one of the options is a really awesome company called Heaves, and they do these really cool contraptions. They're hay steamer, and you can put an entire bale of hay in the steamer, and it soaks it, steams it, and like takes out all the dust. Just make sure your hay is actually, not have any mold in it. But it can massively reduce the symptoms, because hay itself can be so dusty that it can actually cause them to have a problem, but they have to eat it, so that they're kind of losing their battle. So the other option would be to use like really good quality cubes, like hay cubes. So I recommend, in Canada, I recommend the Ontario DCH is the company that I love. And they do Timothy cubes. They do Timothy with beet pulp cubes, and then they also do an alfalfa Timothy mix. They're all completely guaranteed to be not sprayed. They're organic. They're really good, super high quality. And they also give you all of the nutritional data for everything, like even down to like the micro minerals of like zinc and selenium and all of that on their website. So, they're very transparent about, what they use. It's very clean. And they're also really awesome at testing their products. And it's just all on the website. So you can just go and look at it and see exactly like how much protein you want to have. Pretty much everything that they have is low sugar. So they're just, I would say, probably the most ethical feed company in Canada. And I recommend them to everybody because they're just so awesome. I just wish more companies were like them. So I'm sure there is a company in the States that is similar, but I have yet to find one that I would recommend. But if anyone has a company that they know that is of that kind of quality, please let us know, because I would love to have a US source to send people to.
Awesome, Sarah. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. This was actually the perfect time. I don't think that's ever happened.
It didn't seem like an hour at all.
No, I don't think it's ever happened this way before.
So good.
Do I have our next session here handy so everyone can? No, I don't, but I'm going to put it out on Facebook so everyone can sign up, join us. Thank you, Sarah, for putting that together and sharing your insight. Sarah's also an animal nutritionist, if you didn't know that, theanimalsynergist.com. And she also heads up our equine department at Adored Beast. So thanks again, Sarah, for joining us.
Do like a private, if they're really struggling and they want to do a private consultation. I do homeopathics as well. So if you tried all the other stuff and you want to add, homeopathy to the program, I can also help with that.
Awesome. And Sarah hangs out on our Facebook community as well, the Adored Beast Collective. Thank you, everyone. See you next month. Have a good night. Bye, Sarah.
Bye, Steph.